Hi, and welcome to this presentation on workers' compensation for your business in Minnesota. My name is Christelle Tyson Escobar, and I'm with the Tyson Escobar Agency, here to talk about just some essential basic knowledge about insuring yourself for workers' compensation and what steps you need to take to make sure that you're protected in your small business. The first really important topic that we have to talk about when we're talking about workers' compensation requirements is who really is an employee in terms of the workers' compensation law. So workers' compensation says really any worker, any person that works under your direction or supervision, or they may work independently, but they use the resources of your business to do that work, that person would be considered an employee under the workers' compensation law and would need to have coverage. So some factors that really don't matter and don't affect a person's qualification from being an employee and being entitled to work comp benefits would be things like age. They could be underage and still be entitled to work comp benefits. Their migratory status is completely irrelevant. The form of compensation they receive is irrelevant. And even if they don't receive compensation for the work, they might still be entitled to certain benefits. The type of work that they do does not matter, and neither does the amount or duration of the work. So they might have done work for you for an hour, for a day. They are still, during that time, considered your employee and entitled to worker compensation protection. So what exactly is work comp going to cover? It's going to cover from any accident, injury, illness, or disease that results from a workplace-specific hazard. It's going to pay for the medical expenses, including emergency transportation, any surgeries, therapies, medications, and medical equipment or services that are required for as long as they're required. It's going to cover loss of wages according to that worker's typical earnings, including any earnings that they might have from a job outside the job where they were injured. It's also going to cover additional expenses and services they might need due to the injury. And it's important to note that an employee does not require legal representation to claim or to receive work comp benefits. In fact, most claims are settled without needing to hire an attorney, although it may actually be advised in many cases. So how much does workers' compensation actually cost? Well, the rate is going to be based on the risk level of the job that they perform, and it's going to be calculated as a percentage of the employee's wages. So here we have two examples, one for low risk work, one for high risk work. A worker who does cleaning work, for example, is going to pay an average rate of about 4% to be insured. So an employee that earns about $15 an hour would cost to insure about 15 times 4% or about 60 cents per hour to insure that worker. If you have a high-risk worker like a roof installer, the average rate for that type of worker would be about 30%. So if an employee earns $25 an hour doing roofing work, the cost to insure them would be about 25 times 30% or $7.50 per hour to insure that worker. These rates are accumulating and being calculated in real time. And much like taxes, if you do not make active payments on your workers' compensation rate periodically throughout the year, the debt will actually accumulate and you might be due to pay a really high work comp bill at the end of the year. So when you're setting up this type of coverage, be mindful that you set up a payment plan that coincides with the cash flows of your business so that you're paying as much in real time as possible and don't have a debt that accumulates. The other thing I should mention is that the wages that your employee earns are audited on an annual basis for every work comp policy that exists. Even if you have a work comp policy with no employees, which is the case for a select number of businesses. And so it's really important that you have good record keeping in terms of what your employees earn and also that you are keeping track of how often you should make payments so you don't have this debt accumulate when it's time to audit. So there are some exceptions. There are some people that can work in your business without requiring work comp coverage if the proper procedures are followed. These include business owners and partners. It includes the immediate family of those owners and partners. It includes subcontractors, but I put an asterisk here because a subcontractor is a very special and defined relationship that we'll talk about in a minute. And of course, vendor employees, they might be doing work at your business under your direction or supervision. But if they're actually employed by another company that provides you with products and services, most likely they are already insured through that company. So a traditional business structure might look something like this. You start out with a founder or owner and potentially some business partners. And sometimes many businesses will actually work with their immediate family and hire their immediate family to be their first source of labor. And that's a really smart way to get started because for many traditional businesses, when there's only owners, partners, and family of those, at his immediate family working in the business, workers' compensation might actually not yet be required. But as soon as you start hiring employees that are outside of that group, the requirement is to insure those workers with workers' compensation. And like I mentioned, it doesn't matter how infrequent the work is or how small the volume of work. From the minute that they start working with you, that coverage is required. So let's go to the theme of subcontractors because there's a lot of confusion in this area. And there are a lot of trades where subcontracting is really common. So we want to make sure and define for you what really makes a worker a subcontractor rather than an employee. So subcontractor is defined as an independent business or an independent worker, and they work under your direction or supervision, but, and that's a big but, they use their own capital, their own equipment, their own resources to perform the work. They manage their own risks, their own expenses, and their own professional, legal, and civil responsibilities. So they would typically be registered as their own business. They would have their own tax IDs at the state and federal level. They would be following all the codes, licensing, registration requirements for their trade, independent of your business. And thirdly, they actually offer their services under a legal written contract that specifies the responsibilities of each of the parties. So the contractor, who would be you, the business owner, who would be hiring that worker, and the subcontractor who's being hired. And it would describe the nature of the relationship to ensure that it's clear to both parties what the responsibilities of each is. And really here, I have summarized them into 3 points, but there is a specific 10-factor determination test that the state uses to actually test and see whether a specific worker is really a subcontractor or if they're just an employee who might look a little bit like a subcontractor at times, but is still an employee under the law and is still entitled to benefits. So this is really important to understand because many industries do subcontract quite a bit. When you think of construction, remodeling, repair work, all sorts of services that are provided are under a traditional contracting business model. And in those situations, you'll generally have a general contractor, whether that's a specific construction general contractor or just the contractor being the company that actually markets the services directly to the consumer, directly to the customer, and then hires out underneath the umbrella of their business the work to other independent business owners or sole proprietors. And typically there might be several layers of subcontractors, or you might also call them freelancers of sorts, that work underneath this general contractor. But it seems that often, eventually, at the lowest level of work, often the wages are not significant enough for a person to be willing to take on all the responsibilities of actually being an independent sole proprietor or an independent business. So many times, many of the most frontline workers might be treated like subcontractors when in actuality they really are employees. And so I want to wrap up that definition by going back and revisiting who is really an employee, because if a person does not fully meet the requirements to be a subcontractor, then they will automatically fall under this employee category. And that's any worker that's working under your supervision or direction, and they might work independently, but they use the resources of your business. And so this type of employee does need to be covered. When you are audited on your workers' compensation policy, which is a certainty that you will be audited each and every year, it will be determined who really is a sub and who really is an employee. And a lot of carriers do operate under the assumption that everybody is an employee unless it can be specifically proven that they are a subcontractor. So it's very careful to know, or very important that you're careful to know where you stand with that. So lastly, what type of steps should you follow to appropriately protect your business? Well, first, you should understand the relationships with the workers that you have. You want to also identify the risks and know if somebody perhaps maybe is exempt from coverage. Are they still doing the type of work that's risky enough to cover them anyway? And this is where it's really important to seek out some professional advice. So somebody that can really help you understand those relationships a little bit better, and maybe put some things in place to better define the relationships you have with your workers. They can help you look at your risks and understand what the best way to protect those risks are. Sometimes it's with an insurance policy. Sometimes it's with a plethora of other strategies, including legal contracts that protect your business, plans to actually limit the risks and the hazards in your business environment, and perhaps also just training and information and knowledge that would be helpful for you to have during your business planning. So when you implement that type of protection plan with a professional advisor, you're going to be a lot more likely to actually be well protected and to be able to focus really on what you do and not let the risk of a workplace accident or an employee lawsuit throw off the trajectory of your business. So again, my name is Cristel Tyson Escobar, and we're at your service at the Tyson Escobar Agency. We are experts in commercial insurance and risk management for small business. We have a plethora of tools to help you plan and help you be prepared for the risks that will come your way. And you can reach us by phone. You can visit our website at insureprotect.com to see the range of services that we offer. And you can find us on Google to see what clients and past business partners who have worked with us, done business with us, say about us. So we encourage you to do that. And again, we really thank you for your time, and we wish you the best in business.